I was born and raised in Chicago. I grew up on the city's near west side, which was, I was maybe a mile and a half away from the United Center. It was a fairly rough neighborhood, but from my earliest days, I started, drawing, probably started with a crayon or something, and found myself inspired by cartoons. Anything I saw on TV, I remember Popeye was a big thing that I watched a lot. Seeing Bruce Lee on the Batman television series was a big thing for me. I didn't know who he was. And this was when I discovered, oh, he's this thing called a martial artist. That was the birth of my Kung Fu consciousness. Whenever I watched a TV show that excited me or saw a movie that excited me, the first thing I did was draw a picture and try to retell those stories as comic books. For some reason, the most difficult thing for me was to find stuff to draw on. Paper was at a premium, so whenever I could get paper, I would, draw on it. I would draw on the backs of things. I'd draw on magazines, whatever I had. Paper seemed to be expensive. Growing up in the city, graffiti art was a big thing that was happening at the time, especially in the early 80s. A lot of the time, we would do stuff, on the sneak. And then I think we discovered after a while, if you just knock on a door and ask, a lot of the times they'll let you paint a mural on the side of their business or whatever it was. And so we did a lot of murals in the mid-late 80s. But I was a huge comic book reader, both DC and Marvel, and found a lot of inspiration from the comic book artists who were popular at the time. And so, of course, it was my dream to illustrate comic books, and eventually actually got a job doing it, and used that money to kind of pay my way through school. Most of the work I did was for a comic book called The Real Ghostbusters, based on the cartoon that was out at the time. I was still at the American Academy of Art, so I was still in college, and I was still illustrating the Ghostbusters comic book, when a friend of mine who I met at the American Academy of Art named John Vogel got a job at Williams Electronics doing pixel art for video games.
He had gotten a job at Now Comics, and he wanted me to help him with Real Ghostbusters. And I was like, sure. So he got me an interview at Now Comics. Then once I got my job at Williams Bally Midway, Mark Trammell now needs an artist. Who can we get to work with him? And I'm like, I know a guy that's doing the Ghostbusters comic book,
And John called me up and said that they were looking for another artist. When I was hired at Williams, it was to work on Smash TV. And so I interviewed with Mark, I interviewed with Eugene Jarvis.
Amazing guy, amazing artist, working on Smash TV. He came up with this animation that the character, as he exploded, the eyeball came up right facing you in the face. And basically he had to, 3D rotate all this stuff. Like the man was a human 3D rendering system. The guy's a genius.
So Smash TV was a lot of fun to work on, a lot of hand-drawn pixel sprites, very small graphics in terms of the character art that I was creating. I know that in the back of my mind, I still wanted to do comic book art, but I fell in love with video games and the folks that I worked with at Williams, and I knew right away that, hey, this is the place for me.